Testing audio.
Yep.
Chair Hardy, we can begin the meeting now.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Gamero. I would like to welcome everyone to the Special Planning Commission meeting set for Thursday, September 17th at 6 p.m. Those of you who have been waiting patiently, please forgive us. We have been experiencing some technical difficulties, hopefully all resolved. And I will lead us all in the Pledge of Allegiance. Let's hope I do better than the last time. Oh. And with a picture and a flag, even better. Thank you, Vice Chair Pont. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now I will call the meeting to order again, I guess, and ask for Ms. Gamero to take the roll, please.
Thank you, Chair Hardy. Commissioner Hale.
Here.
Commissioner Anderson.
Here.
Commissioner Monette.
Here.
Vice Chair Pont.
Here.
And Chair Hardy.
Here. And now I would like to ask Ms. Nixon if she would explain how members of the public can connect to this meeting, please.
Yes, good evening, everyone, and thank you, Chair Hardy. So for tonight's meeting, there are a few options and ways to participate for public comment, and public comment will occur when the chair calls for it. So if you're joining via Zoom, you can, if you're joining from a computer, there is a raise hand feature, and that is in the top part of the computer screen where you will see that. And if you're joining from an iPad, you'll also have the raise hand feature as well. For those who are calling in and only want to use a phone, I'm going to share my screen here and list the number to call in. So you'll need to call 669-900-6833. And then at the prompt, you'll have to put in 860-7588-8028 and press pound. And then during public comment, you can press *9 to speak, and that will put you in the queue. I will flash this up again when the chair opens for public comment. So we will have this available. And thank you again, and that is my presentation on how to participate.
Thank you very much. That brings us to item 3 on the agenda. That's the Phantom Public Forum, which we don't have because this is a special meeting and there are provisions in the Brown Act that call for public comment only during consideration of items on the agenda. We also have a space in the agenda for consent items, but we have none. So we are moving straight to public hearings, item 5.1. This is a continuation, really, of the public hearing on the application by Ted Hall on behalf of Long Meadow Ranch LLC for a use permit amendment and design review approval in order to make operational, including additional events and minor physical changes to the existing farmstead property at 738 Main Street in the Service Commercial Zoning District. The applicant is also requesting use permit, design review, lot merger, lot line adjustment, a variance, a water agreement, and a development agreement for approval in order to construct a new 65-room hotel with ancillary structures including a multi-purpose building, fitness center, utility building, and agricultural barns totaling approximately 53,200 square feet of building area on the property located at 1,000 Mills Lane, in the service commercial and 20-acre agriculture districts. In accordance with Article 6 of the CEQA guidelines, a mitigated negative declaration and mitigation monitoring and reporting program has been prepared for the proposed project. Now, again, this is a continuance of the meeting we held on September 14th. So at this time, I will ask staff if there are any supplemental reports to present this evening following on Monday's discussion.
Yes, thank you, Chair Hardy. I have provided the commission with a memo, which has also been posted to the agenda, which contains several draft conditions of approval that were based on commission comments at the meeting on the 14th. These supplemental conditions are for commission review and consideration, and we can put those on the screen when the time comes for those to be discussed. Also provided and posted to the agenda was a memo from the applicant's traffic consultant clarifying demand for the supplemental offsite parking lot. As noted in the memo I provided, I did check with the police department, and no noise complaints were received at the existing restaurant property in 2019 or 2020. So I just wanted to make note of that. Staff would also like to note that we are not proposing any changes to the development agreement with regards to the annual review due to staff capacity limitations. At this time, I will turn it over to the city attorney, who is going to have a speak briefly about cumulative impacts in relation to the project. And I know that we also received an 11th hour, literally, letter from Water Audit California, and we are prepared to address that when appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Heacock.
Thank you, Chair Hardy. Ethan Walsh with the City Attorney's Office. The CEQA issues that Aaron just mentioned, I'm going to ask Andrew Scanchi, our CEQA attorney, to speak to those.
So,
Go ahead, please, Mr. Scanchi.
yeah, the issue of cumulative impacts, the project was not required to analyze. CEQA did not require analysis of cumulative impacts, but many of the impacts here discussed in the MND are cumulative in nature. For example, air and greenhouse gas emissions are cumulative in nature, and as discussed in the MND and the technical memoranda, project's air and greenhouse gas emission impacts are all less than significant. Further, if a project does not make some contribution to a cumulative environmental effect, the cumulative effect cannot be characterized as a cumulative impact of the project. And this is discussed in a number of cases, and I'll just read one quote here that's kind of directly on point from a leading case. It says, when there is no substantial evidence of any individual potentially significant effects by a project under review, the lead agency may reasonably conclude the effects of the project will not be cumulatively considerable, and it need not require an EIR on this basis. I can address anything else, but that's kind of what I was going to discuss on cumulative impacts. I can answer other questions about the water letter that came in.
I have a question. Can I just ask a question or appropriate?
I forgot to unmute myself. Please, Commissioner Manette, ask your question.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I'm hearing what you said. I'm also reading that if you do an EIR provides for the analysis of overall cumulative effects. Is that one of the differences between an EIR and a mitigating negative declaration, that the cumulative effects are looked at in an EIR and not looked at in a, or not necessarily looked at in the mitigated negative dec?
Yeah, so an EIR does require separate discussion of impact. But
You're cutting in and out. I'm not sure. I didn't hear what you said. Yeah.
and CEQA does require, when you prepare an EIR, CEQA requires a separate detailed, more detailed discussion cumulative.
Excuse me, Mr. Scanchi, we're having trouble with your audio. Would you try please turning your video off to see if that solves the problem?
All right. I'll speak again. So CEQA requires, when you prepare an EIR, that the cumulative impacts be discussed in more detail. But as mentioned, the MND does consider whether the project would have a cumulatively significant impact. It's implicit in the analysis. The EIR does require more extensive discussion of it. That is a difference, yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you. You have succeeded where thousands failed. I've been looking that up online for days.
That's why he gets the big bucks.
Right.
Do you have any other questions for staff, Bobby?
I think so, yeah.
Related to the updated presentations, or are these things carrying over from last week?
Well, first I wanted to address Aaron about the noise complaints, his response.
Yeah.
My noise complaints, I took issue with Mr. Hall because he said there had been no complaints since 2015. But my complaints were not through the police department. I went down in my bathrobe and curlers to Farmstead and spoke directly to the staff, whom I said last time were very cordial and very responsive. So that's why those complaints that I mentioned last time there was no record of them, because apparently the staff did not make a record of my.
But you have a question for staff.
I just wanted to clarify that for Aaron. I'm sorry. Well, let's see. I asked. Yes, I had talked to Maya about, my question was, did my request to amend the development agreement to have the city do the monitoring, was that incorporated into what we're doing? And she's pointed out that is not usually done, that it takes way too much staff time to do the auditing, that it is, as proposed, the developer will do the auditing of the development agreement and make a report to the city, and the city can follow up in any way they wanted. I wanted to go on record as saying, I find that to be, is there anything to do about that? Because I find that to be a rather odd situation where an audit is being done by the people who are being audited. And so essentially it's an audit. So I wanted to ask if there was any other way.
Commissioner, well, you have a question then.
Yes, I was going to ask if there was any way that the city could ask the developer to hire a consultant, or to give the city, pay the city to do that monitoring, that oversight. And that was my question on that. And connected to that is, I was wondering does the city monitor the mitigation measures? For example, in the biological resources and so forth, there will be, there's going to be ornithologists that are hired to look for certain birds in the area. I was wondering if the developer hires those ornithologists, or does the city hire them? And is there any oversight on those mitigation, on all the mitigation measures that have been submitted in order to get the impacts to less than significant? I was just wondering what the monitoring process was on that, if any.
Chuck, can you answer that?
Chair Hardy, I think I can address the development agreement question initially, and then I can speak a bit to the second question, and then maybe staff can follow up as to how they do it, kind of as a practical matter on the ground. With regard to the development agreement, essentially what the requirement is that there be an annual report on compliance with the development agreement, and so it's an additional kind of layer of reporting that has to be done under the agreement, and that's what the developer is responsible for. But throughout the development process, we do oversee and monitor compliance with the requirements of the development agreement. And we can't really avoid that because of the way it's set up. Essentially, the way that the development agreement is set up is they have certain rights that we've granted to them already through the development agreement. And then they have certain obligations that they have to comply with as kind of consideration for the rights that we've granted them. So, for example, they have to pay us the affordable housing fee. They have to construct the improvements to Mills Lane and all the other kind of infrastructure improvements that they have to do. So we are monitoring all that work anyways through other means. Public Works is overseeing all the infrastructure work that is done with the requirements to pay affordable housing fees. Those are required to be paid before specific, steps in the process, such as receiving a building permit, and they're included in the conditions of approval. So we do have other means other than the development agreement that we monitor and oversee the developer's obligations under that document. So this report, it's really another layer of reporting that's contemplated in the development agreement statutes. And given our limited staff, we didn't want to do that additional reporting. It doesn't mean, though, that we're not overseeing that agreement. We do monitor it through the entire process.
But do you monitor the mitigation?
So yeah, getting to the mitigation, and Aaron and Erica may be able to speak to how that works generally. But yes, the mitigation measures, it is the city's obligation to oversee and ensure compliance with those. And Aaron and Erica, you may be able to speak better than I can as to how that works on the ground in St. Helena.
Yeah, I just note that, Bobby, if you look at the appendices of the mitigated neg deck, appendices A1 and A2 are what's called a mitigation monitoring and reporting program. And that lays out all the mitigation measures that were required through the CEQA process,
Right.
when they're required to be done, and who's required to oversee them. So it's basically a series of check boxes that says, here's the mitigation, this is when it needs to be done, and this is who's responsible
Yeah,
for it.
who checks them off? Who goes over and sees that they're done and checks them off?
It's city staff. So some are planning department,
Okay.
some are public works, some are building department.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay.
I had another question. Can I ask? I noticed that the addressing the Napa Fault, the statement was that the Napa Fault line was 12 miles southwest of St. Helena, and that was based on a study by Peterson in 1996, which my knowledge is, or what I was told, is that the Napa quake, which was on August 24th of 2014, changed the Napa fault line, and it cracked up the valley in a different configuration. So I'm wondering if the lack of significance based on a study that was done in 1996 as to where the Napa fault line is located is adequate for what's really the case since the Napa earthquake in 2014. I'm a little concerned, particularly about the liquefaction. This source was Ishihara and Yoshimine, and that the liquefaction study was in 1992. So I don't know if you updated those studies, or it seems to me that that needs to be looked at in terms of where the Napa fault line is now after the 2014 quake. And my understanding is that the geologists in the state redid the maps to show the changes. So that's a question I have for you guys.
So I guess I can start. I don't know if the city attorney wants to follow up, but my understanding is those maps at the time of preparation of this report had not been updated by the USGS. That said, even if they had, the difference between 12 miles away and, let's say hypothetically it was 7 miles away, isn't going to change the significance findings in the CEQA.
How do you know?
Because in the grand scheme of geology, the difference between 4 miles, 8 miles, and 12 miles, it's probably not going to make that big of a difference. And regardless of that, all California building codes are required to be met for any construction to offset any potential seismic activity.
But the liquefaction, I'm thinking of the liquefaction.
Excuse me, Commissioner Manette. Mr. Heacock, was there not a geotechnical report submitted in connection with this application?
I believe more than one.
And do they not address the liquefaction issue and make specific recommendations?
They do.
For construction?
They do.
When were those done?
I bring that up, Commissioner Manette, because I believe that the geotechnical reports cut right to the chase, if you will, with respect to what the proximity of the fault means for this site with respect to liquefaction. And in fact, unless I'm very much mistaken, the report recommends specific measures involving, I'm fairly certain, I don't have the report in front of me, but I think it involves excavating the materials that are likely to generate the liquefaction risk and replacing those materials with material that is not subject to liquefaction.
So that report is a current report, and it's not the 1992 and the 1996 report?
This is a site-specific geotechnical report for this project.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
I didn't know that, so thank you. That's the answer I wanted to hear.
We have over 1,000 pages of material, so it would easily be overlooked. But as I was interested, I did actually read it.
Thank you. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Do you have any other questions, Commissioner Manette?
Well, I did. I guess I wanted to know, I don't know if this is the right time for it, but in terms of cumulative effects, I mean, I just wanted to know if any consideration, because I noticed that the noise report had to do with vehicle noise and other noise, but not with amplified music. But and more importantly, the traffic study. Is there any? Was there anything in there that looked at the cumulative effects, or just the effects of this particular project on the problem of evacuating if there's a crisis, and what the cumulative effects would be of this hotel and the other proposed hotels in not just regionally, in St. Helena, Calistoga, Yountville, and Napa, in terms of what would happen if there needed to be an evacuation, and what impact these new developments would have on that, if any. I was just wondering if any of that had been looked at in the traffic report. I mean, maybe Commissioner Pont knows. I don't know how to read those traffic reports. They just make my eyes kind of turn in opposite directions. But I just wonder if that's been an issue that's being addressed at all, because it seems to me to be pretty crucial at this point as we go ahead with our plans to develop the city and to develop the region.
Well, I do want to keep this meeting organized and on track. So
Okay,
right now, the question is fine. I just want to distinguish between questions for staff and questions for the applicant. We will be opening the public hearing and inviting the applicant and the applicant's consultants to speak. We'll have an opportunity to question them then.
Well, did the traffic report
can you
address that at
answer
all?
Commissioner Manette's question, or do we need to wait for the applicant's time here?
Oh, okay.
I would say most of that is probably better for the applicant. That said, that kind of cumulative analysis, it isn't typically done. So even in an EIR, it's not a comprehensive regional analysis. So you're not taking into account all current activity, projects under construction, proposed future construction from a all-encompassing regional basis. Even EIRs don't do that. So I just wanted to make that point.
Okay. Thank you.
Very good. Vice Chair Pont.
I do have a question for staff on Aaron's memorandum of the 16th. And let me work my way to it. The shuttle service is to be provided from the satellite parking lot to the place of businesses. Are the vehicles supposed to be E&H capable?
What does that mean?
You're muted, Aaron, please. Elderly and handicapped.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I would assume so.
Okay. Also, the lot itself isn't part of the agreement such that they put an ADA eligible route from the lot to 1,000 Mills Lane. Is that correct?
Yep.
Then I'm wondering why under bullet 2 here, with the exception of handicapped employees, all employees shall be parked at the off-site supplemental lot. It would seem to me that under the ADA, they simply demand equal access. So if you've got an eligible ADA route and are using ADA equipped vehicles for shuttles, it would seem to me that handicapped employees would also be able to park there, and you would be clean under the ADA on it. Is that correct?
I believe so. So the addition, adding with the exception was specifically requested by the applicant.
Okay, I'm trying to figure out what's going on here, so I'll have to ask the applicant when we get to that. But it would seem my understanding of the ADA simply demands that you provide equal access, and by having the ADA eligible route and the ADA eligible vehicles, you are providing that equal access. So it's not necessary for employees handicapped to park any other place than the satellite lot. Okay, thank you. I will wait until we're speaking to the applicant then.
Thank you, Vice Chair Punt. I appreciate that. Commissioner Hale. Any questions?
No, I have no questions for staff.
Thank you. Commissioner Anderson.
No questions.
Thank you. I have none at this time, so I think we're at the point where I can and will open the public hearing. The public hearing is open, and I would like to invite the applicant to speak. This is for the purpose of presenting any responses or updates pursuant to the discussion at our last meeting. Mr. Hall?
Thank you, Chair Hardy. We left the last meeting with 4 follow-up items. I'll take them kind of in the reverse order because 2 of them have been dealt with. One was a question by Commissioner Manette about cumulative greenhouse gas effects, and I think we've addressed that this evening, and she also communicated to staff that that question was no longer relevant. The second item was we had agreed to update the parking study, which was done and has been presented by Mr. Heacock, so that was also behind us. I did want to take just a minute to share with the commission our complaint, a summary of our complaint log that will give you a little bit more context and information. So I'm going to do that right this moment. What you see here is a summary since 2013 of all of the recorded complaints that have been received at Farmstead, organized by year. The columns going across are employee parking issue confirmed, meaning that we confirmed whether or not the vehicle that had been identified in fact was an employee. questions of guest parking, total parking complaints, meaning those that were all confirmed. We've had a number of complaints which, when we actually evaluated the car under consideration, it was neither a guest nor an employee's parking place. But we have, for full disclosure, given you the total of all of our parking complaints. And then there's a category of noise or music, and then total complaints. What I wanted to be sure that everybody appreciated was there have been no guest parking related issues on Charter Oak since 2015. So 5 years of no complaints at all. So it illustrates the effectiveness, we believe, of our approach to handling guest parking. And there have been no noise complaints since 2017. And if we look back 5 years, there was one in 2016. The other important point to note here is, you see, are 2 points. One, in 2015, we had 4 confirmed parking incidents, which was, by far the most. That resulted in an employee being terminated after a warning. And in the other 4 cases that have occurred in total in 2018, 19, and 20 have all resulted in a warning letter and a HR action. And we take this very, very seriously. And so, again, if you think about it in terms of aggregate impact on the neighborhood, this is a very modest issue. We've had a total of 39 complaints, which you can see in the next to the last column along the bottom row at the right. I do want to point out that 27 of those 39 total complaints have come from the same person. So we'll protect the identity of that person, but we have a vigilant spokesperson on behalf of the neighborhood, which should reassure all of you, if there's the slightest possibility of an issue, it gets brought to our attention. Beyond that one complaint source, we've only had 12 anonymous complaints over the entire history. And over the last 5 years, only five complaints. So speaking to the questions of both music, noise, and guest parking that may be concerning to members of the commission, those are the factual results.
Thank you, Mr. Hall.
I have another item. I'm just trying to stop the sharing. There we go.
Very good.
And then there was a question about, you recall, we tried to have our sound expert speak briefly in response to a question about what we were doing to mitigate noise, primarily from the outdoor bar area. And I'd like Mr. Dave Walsh to speak briefly to what we're doing to further ensure that we don't have any intrusions in the neighborhood. Dave, could you speak up, please?
There, is that better?
We're just now hearing you, yes.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, we did a study around the outdoor bar, and the impact of the study was acoustical improvements have been recommended with your architect and with your personnel. There's a picture there. The improvements include, first of all, there's a new storage shed just to the east of the bar, which provides a lot of noise reduction. And then there are the new sound walls, which on the east and north side, which are an 8-foot high solid wall, as opposed to a fence with leaky slats in it. The other things that are going to be done on the underside of the roof overhang over the bar, we are adding sound absorptive materials, which can work outdoors. We're also will be lowering the height of the loudspeakers so that less sound can get out to the community. And all of these modifications, the acoustical improvements will achieve compliance with the code, which would be less than 40 dBA between 7 p.m. and 10 p.m. And that's just a very quick summary.
Thank you, Dave. We appreciate that very much. So there were two additional questions that were raised this evening. Chair Hardy, would you like me to address those now?
Yes, I think this is the appropriate time. Thank you.
Great. With regard to the language of the parking condition that Mr. Pont referred to, we were simply looking to create a convenient opportunity for our handicapped employees to take advantage, and especially as it relates to the lodging parking lot, which has a large supply of parking relative to its underlying requirement. It seemed like to us like an appropriate thing to do. You may or may not know, but I'm handicapped myself, so.
If you want to do better than the ADA requirements, that's fine. But I looked at this, didn't know who was the source of it, and saw the city essentially requesting you as the applicant to provide more than is required under statute. So I wanted to find out where that came from and why, because imposing on the applicant things that are above and beyond what statute calls for, it seemed to me a little excessive.
Well, I appreciate that very much. We did suggest this ourselves. And then the final question was whether our traffic studies made any provision for evacuation in the eventuality of an emergency, and we can ask our traffic expert, Mark Crane, to speak to that question, please.
Yes, we conducted a cumulative year 2040 traffic analysis for our traffic study, which would be exactly the same analysis as you would get if we had done this study for an EIR. So in that respect, yes, full cumulative analysis required by the state was done for this traffic study. In regards to emergency evacuation, no, we were not requested to do that evaluation by the city, and we did not conduct that.
Mr. Hardy, unless I missed something in the list of questions that have been directed to us, Mr. Pont.
I have only seen that kind of study done, Mark, in areas of high fire hazard, and very rarely. So we don't have any of those conditions in this instance. So I wouldn't have expected to see it either.
Okay, very good.
Mr. Hardy, I think those were the 6 items that we had recorded that we had an obligation to respond. If there are no others on your list, I think we're complete.
Well, thank you. I will give the commissioners opportunities to ask any remaining questions now related to the information just presented. So Commissioner Pont, have your questions been answered?
Yes, they have, Chair Hardy.
Thank you. And Commissioner Manette, do you have any further questions for the applicant? Your microphone is muted.
Is there any way we could ask for that kind of a study now? I mean, it seems to me, Commissioner Pont said I guess we're not by flames, but it seems to me that we could be evacuated because of smoke. They were evacuated east of Silverado Trail this time. And I see this, my friend in Sebastopol was evacuated and so last year. So I see it as a, maybe something that maybe not starting with this. Well, I don't know. Could they add that to this study? Or is it too late to ask that? Or does it seem?
Well, that's not a question for the applicant, surely. But I think, so what I'm going to suggest is this, Commissioner Manette. I do want to finish questions for the applicant so that we can invite other members of the public to speak. When we close the public hearing and go into our deliberations, there will be an opportunity to ask questions of staff. Okay. So I would ask that you defer that particular question to that opportunity at the beginning of our deliberations.
Okay, could I have one more question for the applicant then?
Of course.
Comment and question. The comment is that, I mean, I appreciate the sound walls and so forth, but the things that were under the category of annoyance in the report that was in the binder that we got, they didn't, amplified music was not one of the things they look at when they're looking at annoyance sound. It's ambient sounds and traffic sounds. And so I know the night air in the valley, and I know it very well. And the sound from a live band, which is when I had to go over when they had live bands, does not stop at the top of a sound wall. So I was just wondering if you have any ideas about having live bands playing again. I mean, because you had them in that little bar that's right off of Charter Oak. That's where I heard the noise. I could hear it I would be walking and I could hear it on Spring Street up, up by Allen and Spring. So I'm just wondering if you're going to continue to have live bands, or is that something you're not going to do, or are you going to approach it differently, or what?
Well, we're going to continue to offer live entertainment at our bar within the rules of the city and be fully compliant. The sound walls and the studies that we've done have sound being at 40 dB at our property line, which is well within the noise ordinance of the city. I'm now starting to understand that maybe you were walking by our property.
No, I was in my house.
Well, it's hard for us to understand how that would be possible. I don't want to debate that with you. And what I can assure the commission is that we're going to be fully compliant with noise. We've not had any complaints. We've not had any complaints. You're 4/10 of a mile away from our property, and there have been no intervening complaints by any of the other neighbors. And we'll be compliant and subject to whatever enforcement process is followed by the city, but we don't expect that to be an issue. Okay. It's the reason that we're voluntarily creating these sound walls and have hired an acoustical sound expert to be able to address it. So,
well, I'm open-minded. I'm totally willing to see what happens.
Well, thank you for that. I really appreciate, Commissioner Manette.
Thank you, Commissioner Manette. Commissioner Hale, do you have any questions for the applicant?
I do not.
Thank you. And Commissioner Anderson, do you have any questions at this time?
I do not.
Thank you. I'm good as well. Thank you, Mr. Hall. And the public hearing is open, and I would like to invite members of the public to raise their hands as the system provides. And I'm going to rely on Ms. Nixon to let me know when we have a speaker to introduce.
Thank you so much, Chair Hardy. Before we acknowledge raised hands, I'd just like to share my screen one more time and just share the numbers so that folks know if they need to call in from the phone that they will dial 669-900-6833. And then at the prompt, they will enter 860-7588-8028. And then they will be prompted to press *9 to put them in the queue. And I would just like to make sure that I share that information again. Thank you. And it looks like we do have public comment and individuals with raised hands. I am going to unmute this person. Please state your full name. I'm seeing the name here is Mike. So Mike, you should be able to speak, and please state your full name. And you will have to unmute yourself. You should be able to do that.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay. Have never done a Zoom call with this type of format where we're not included. So this is Mike Preston. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you. I was in front of this planning commission several months ago applying for the approval to build a residence at 500 Mills Lane, which is just down the street from the applicant's project. I also own a home that's currently built and spend time in a house at 962 McCorkle Avenue, which is right around the corner from Farmstead, about 1 block over from Charter Oak. Building a house on 500 Mills Lane, currently under construction. My daughter lives at 626 Mills Lane on 9 acres on a home there and vineyard there. So between the two of us, we are two of the, I don't know, I'm going to say 6 or 7 residents of Mills Lane. We fully support the expansion of the Farmstead project. We believe that the farmstead is a true asset to the community, and we look forward to its expansion. We believe that the public improvements proposed by Mr. Hall, of which there are many, reclaimed water, storm drain, traffic signals, Mills Lane access, etc., are huge benefits for this community. We believe the city needs this development in order to stay vital within the Napa Valley. We see other hotels being built up in Calistoga, Four Seasons, Roseville, etc. Downtown Napa is doing significant development and improving, and there's a lot of interest in those areas because of the improvements that are being made. We believe that the retail is sort of dying, and there's this anti-business in St. Helena, which as residents and owners of a few properties there now, we see that as a negative. Tax revenues are necessary, and I think that this is a nice way to be able to gain some tax revenues for the city. And I think entertainment revenues or venues are more challenging to find in the area. And for those of us who stay there and friends who come visiting, we believe that entertainment venues are important. We love live bands and we love live music, and we think that that is crucial to people's well-being. And so, you know, instead of fighting against live music and entertainment and places where people gather and have fun, we fully support it. And we believe that St. Helena should be more business friendly. And we also believe that Mr. Hall is doing a first-class project, and he's not trying to cut corners in any way, shape, or form. He's spending a lot of money, including the potential for housing for workers in the community, which we all know is necessary. So as two of the residents, two of the maybe 7 or 8 residents on Mills Lane, we are fully supportive of the Farmstead project and appreciate Mr. Hall's efforts for so many years in trying to get this accomplished and build a quality project for our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming to speak. Ms. Nixon?
Yes, I'm looking to see if there are any more individuals who would like to speak for public comment. Again, if you would like to speak, you can either use the raise hand feature on your iPad or computer. It is in the right-hand pane, or you can call in And at this time, Chair Hardy, I am not seeing any more raised hands. Oh, I am right now. Hold on one second. Let me unmute this person. Last name, Kyle. Let me unmute you, and you should be able to speak. Please state your full name.
Yes, this is Matthew Heil, 605 Pope Street, St. Helena, California. Everybody hear me okay? Great. So I just wanted to speak in favor of this project, and I'd like to underscore all the points that Mr. Preston just made. I'd also like to go out of my way to say that Mr. Hall and his family, Chris and Laddie, have been amazing stewards. They built their project. They started Farmstead in the depths of the recession, in the jaws of decline, economic and otherwise, and they innovated and they adapted and they worked with the community every step of the way to build what is now one of the most successful ventures in our town. And more than any other project or new business that was approved during my tenure as chairman of the Planning Commission and as planning commissioner between 2010 and 2015, they were successful and have left a lasting impact on our town, and I would argue a good one, a great one. They are friendly to visitors and locals alike, which is unique. To also underscore what Mr. Preston said, they offer a variety of different uses that appeal to different sections of our community, whether it's coffee in the morning, lunch, and any sort of activity around their givebacks with the Easter egg hunts, the Halloween pumpkin carving. They also participate in our community's farmers market. And to underscore and understand the impact and the give back of sustainable agriculture and agricultural education, they've been so involved in 4-H. I mean, these are stewards. These are long-term residents. These are exactly the types of operators who we should be pinching ourselves that they are interested in expanding their footprint, continuing their success, and continuing to give to our community all the aforementioned utility upgrades, the offsite improvements, the housing impact, the housing, affordable housing construction, et cetera. So I'd also just like to end by saying Mr. Hall went out of his way to meet with neighbors. He and his team went out of their way to answer every last question. I think the record is now 1,500 pages. Maybe it'll be even more by the time you're done. The number of studies, the number of boxes checked is astronomical and astounding and a tribute to their good stewardship. I fully, wholeheartedly recommend you approve this project and the development agreement with all speed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Heil. Ms. Nixon, do we have any other members of the public who wish to speak?
I am not seeing any more raised hands at this time.
Is that still true?
That is still true.
Very
yes.
good. Then I will close the public hearing. So that brings us to the time for the Commission's discussion and deliberations. I'd like to organize this discussion loosely, or a little bit loosely perhaps, around the action items. I think that will help keep us organized and focused. So for example, with the restaurant at 738 Main Street, we've got a use permit amendment, a design review, and everything knit together by the resolution and conditions of approval. So I propose that we begin by discussing the restaurant use permit. We could just track the resolution and conditions of approval. Maybe that's really the best place to start. If there are questions or comments about the use permit amendment and design review, they should have a place if we're tracking the resolution. So with that, preamble, Vice Chair Pont, would you like to lead the way?
I'd be happy to, but since we're taking them, and I take it 3 pieces, this to me looks like to be the easiest piece. I mean, the project is there, it's functional. The adds to the project physically are very small. We are cleaning up some confusion there's been in the existing use permit, but this clarifies that. And with the adds that Aaron has contemplated to the resolution, it makes it clear what's doable and not there. Really, this is if this had come in by itself, it would have been 20 minutes and done, I think, at least this piece. So I really don't have any questions on this other than, please, let's get this piece done.
Thank you, Vice Chair Pont. Commissioner Manette, you need to unmute yourself, please.
Yeah, I'm not sure what we're doing. Can I go last? Let me hear what other people say, and it might help me understand what we're doing.
Very good. That would be just fine.
And we're addressing what? We're addressing what at this point?
The restaurant.
Just the restaurant. Okay. The restaurant that's there already.
Well, the restaurant is there, and there is an application for certain approvals in connection with the restaurant, and our action items are laid out in the resolution.
Okay.
And the concept is to speak to the things we are being asked to approve.
Okay. Well, I don't have any problems with what was being asked for improvement with the restaurant.
Very good. Thank you. Commissioner Hale.
I'm in agreement with John really on this. I'm happy to swiftly sort of tidy this piece up and move it forward. I don't have issues with the clarifications. I think they're useful and kind of help to uncloud some of those areas. So I'm happy to swiftly move that portion forward.
Thank you.
I have a question. I'm sorry. Can I come back to me for a minute?
I can, certainly.
Okay. My understanding is that we're not supposed to look at this as piece by piece. I thought we were supposed to look at it as a whole project. And I'm totally not, I'm not comfortable just looking at the piece by piece. Am I wrong? Or I probably am, but that's my understanding.
We have to follow the resolutions as far as taking action. And we have a resolution and conditions of approval that are specific to the restaurant property. And we have another resolution with conditions of approval specific to the lodging proposal. The lodging proposal has more action steps for us because in addition to use permit and design review, there's the variance, the development agreement, and the water agreement, as well as a lot line adjustment and lot merger. I think those really go with, for the most part, the lodging proposal. The question of piecemealing, as it's sometimes called, applies to the environmental determination. It doesn't apply to the order in which we speak about the use permits for these separate parcels. But, I would encourage you to look, if you can, at the resolution for the restaurant project. I'm trying to use that as the organizing vehicle for this part of the discussion.
Mhm. Well, I think, okay, because
And I should add, to the extent that following my approach, we've missed anything along the way from your perspective, you will have the opportunity to address everything that's on your mind before we're done. We're not going to get done any other way. And that I can
that's fine. That's fine. So I'll just wait until the end and say what I'm going to say.
Very good. Thank you. Commissioner Anderson.
I'm okay with this piece. I agree with Commissioner Hale about the clarifications and just moving forward.
Thank you. I'm really on the same page with everyone else. I think the changes to the conditions of approval are helpful. I appreciate the clarifications that have come with that part of it. Since it seems there's really more to talk about that falls under the heading of the lodging proposal, I would suggest we go straight to that at this point. And again, the resolution and conditions of approval are, I think, our best written guide to what's in front of us in terms of action items. So with that in mind, Vice Chair Pont, are you ready to begin, or would you like a break from that habit of mine of calling on you first? Your microphone is still muted. You're still muted, Vice Chair Pont.
I might suggest that we give you a 5-sided die in the future so you can roll it. But for right now, I'll go ahead and do this.
I'll look for one of those. Thank you.
The added conditions of approval I am in favor of. I think that the project itself is fine. It's good scope and scale for where it is. I think the design is good. I certainly appreciate the idea to merge all the lots into one unit. That will make things simpler administratively in the future. I don't have any opposition to this at all. The only one thing that I would request is that the Class 1 along Mills Lane, since in its current form, being so short, being parallel to an existing street, meeting a street where it disappears in a few hundred yards, is not recommended by Caltrans, that be included as a deferred development agreement, and when the longer Class 1 comes through, that this be constructed, because otherwise I see it as being confusing to the riders, not necessarily the best choice for the riders, and the city would be taking on potentially a liability that I don't think they really want, particularly since it is not recommended by our state transportation agency. I think it's a great addition when that Class 1 comes through. Before that, I think it's potentially dangerous for all the naive riders that are going to be on it. That's my only change to the conditions of the project at all. I like the project. It's good for the community. It's good for the residents. Even though this is not something the Planning Commission could consider, it's good for the city budget. It meets all the requirements of that space. The variance makes all kinds of sense because that's a holdover from I don't know where, but it's definitely a holdover that nobody does anymore. So it's all good. It's all great. Let's move forward on it. My only holdback is that class 1 where I'd like to see it actually constructed when the longer class 1 becomes available.
Thank you, Vice Chair Pont. I'd like to ask Mr. Heacock, do you see any problem conceptually with putting that component of the project into a deferred improvement agreement pursuant to Vice Chair Pont's comments? You need to unmute yourself, please.
Sorry about that. So are we thinking an amended condition of approval here or an actual deferred improvement agreement? I think that would be something that would be in the public works domain.
Fair enough. So then I will redirect my question to our Public Works Director. Ms. Smithies, would a deferred improvement agreement for this particular offsite improvement be feasible? Or, yeah, what are your comments on that? I'll just give you full rein here.
Well, I'll start off with one of my concerns is with the Central Pacific, the Highway Specific Plan. It's called, I believe, for sidewalks on both sides of mills. So since there's only industrial on the south side and the lodge would require the sidewalk on the north side, we came up with this alternative, have a wider sidewalk path. You know, not necessarily just the class 1, but a 10-foot wide paved shoulder or wide raised sidewalk. In lieu of the 2 5-foot sidewalks on Mills Lane. So I'd probably look at, you know, our CEQA attorney, is that issue solve a problem with you, or, you know, is deferred agreement okay? I think it's technically all right, but because they have an alternate connection through Farmstead, they have the pathway going through the restaurant to Charter Oak. So there is an alternate for the guests to get somewhere like downtown. But if you're trying to connect to, you know, the Performing Arts Center, Grayson, how else are they going to get to that intersection other than walking in the street? So I think I already answered my question on concerns on connecting to the intersection. Plus, you have the people walking up La Fada and adding sidewalk. Now you don't have a sidewalk on the north side of Mills Lane. That's my response. I'm concerned if we don't put something in there.
Thank you. Yes, Vice Chair Pont.
I'm fine with the sidewalk. It may be just a matter of at least partially a matter of labeling. The standards, assuming the city's using Caltrans Class 1 standards, even for a 2-directional Class 1 is minimum 8 feet with 2 2-foot shoulders. If you go to 10 feet, then you have 2 1-foot shoulders. The shoulders are an integral part of the path, and the path must be, if you're once again following their standards, must be at least 5 feet from the street. So, in this case, since you're going wider, another foot, 4 feet from the street. But if it's not designed that way, it's not a Class 1. If you're worried about that, I'm worried about the functional connectivity of it, right? So if you want to write it such that it gets constructed, right, but it's neither labeled nor used as a Class 1 because the dangers of it until the Class 1 comes through, that works just as well. Or if you build 5 foot of it as a sidewalk, and then later on do the other 7 with the shoulders, of course, and then label as a Class 1. I'm not wedded to any of that, how it functionally gets constructed. I'm interested in operationally how it works until the longer Class 1 comes through. And that's where the danger, particularly the naive riders, come through, is a short Class 1 with connections that lead to essentially nothing. is the danger here. So if it's done by labeling or how it's constructed, I'm not wedded to it, just as long as it's not labeled as a class 1 and used as a class 1 until the longer segment gets built.
Ms. Smithies, is there anything you would like to add?
Well, we do have a traffic engineer on here, what the applicant has. I wonder if he'd have some input on there and on how do we, I have problems with building half of one. I was at a city where they had half a trail, and half a trail was, they had a sidewalk and then they had stands for bicyclists or what have you, or joggers, and it was just a mess. I think it should be done right, whether it's called the sidewalk, that wider sidewalk, and we leave it at that. I would appreciate Mr. Crane's input on this one.
Well, in that case, I will reopen the public hearing. And before I invite Mr. Crane to speak, I'm just going to articulate my understanding of the concern here. And please let me know, Vice Chair Pond, if I've got this wrong. But it seems to me the concern has to do with the risk involved in creating a bicycle path of the type that is generally known and understood to be particularly safe, and having it go a short distance to a condition on Highway 29, which is not so safe. And I think the concern must be that, in effect, one has lulled the naive rider into a state of comfort and ease inappropriate to the conditions of Highway 29. Did I get that right, Vice Chair Pond?
Roughly correct.
Okay. I got partial credit.
If I can add to that a little bit, it's a situation and a condition that the State Transportation Agency advises against in its design manual for these types of facilities. So they're flat out saying, don't do it this way. On top of that, you've got Mills Lane right there, a low volume street, still going to be a low volume street that bicycle riders can ride along if they care to. So that would be it.
Very good. Thank you. With the public hearing open, I will invite Mr. Crane to speak if he can shed any light on this, please.
Yes. Well, my opinion, whether you have a 5-foot sidewalk or a 10-foot sidewalk, if somebody wants to ride a bike on the sidewalk, they're going to do it, whether it's 5 feet or 10 feet. So to me, I don't think if it's 10 feet versus 5 feet, it's necessarily going to be more attractive to get people up to Highway 29. They're going to go there if they want to go there. So to me, it would be construct the whole thing now and just get it done with.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Hall.
I wanted to reemphasize a point when Erica was really the person that did some wonderful brainstorming as we laid out this relocated Mills Lane. And the thing that was particularly interesting here is that we were all questioning why we were building a sidewalk on the south side of the street along an industrialized warehouse where there was never going to be any foot traffic. And it seemed like a wasted expense and less effective than a larger, wider sidewalk to the north side. So that's the evolution of this. The notion of calling it a class 1, I think we just fell into that nomenclature is a way of communicating among ourselves. We never really consciously set out as an aspiration to build a class 1, but it just seemed like that's effectively what we were doing. So what really interests us is a safe, wide sidewalk, and to get to a new. What's very attractive to us also is this signal light controlled pedestrian and bicycle crossing at Highway 29. And I think, frankly, the most likely path of a bicycle leaving our project and going that direction will be to cross Highway 29 and go down Grayson. And that will, and someday we'll probably have a bike lane there, but it connects to a bike lane, as you guys all know, where it crosses Sulphur Creek has already been laid out. So that'll be the logical way. And if somebody's going to town, as I illustrated in the presentation on Monday, the logical route is for somebody to take a bicycle through the property on its paths and then make a right-hand turn onto Charter Oak and go down to Allison, to Pope, to Churchill, to Hunt. And that's the safe way. So we'd love to deliver people safely on foot and by bicycle and cost effectively to that pedestrian protected traffic signal.
Thank you, Mr. Hall.
Could I also add one more thing, and that is if you do a full width sidewalk, pathway, whatever you want to call it, you can put in your finished landscaping next to it right now. If you just do half of one, then you can just do landscaping on one side, and then you really don't know what to do on the other side as far as when the rest will be built.
Thank you. Before closing the public hearing, I'm going to ask Ms. Nixon if there are any other members of the public who wish to speak.
Thank you, Chair Hardy. I'm looking right now to see if anyone has a raised hand and would like to speak. Again, it's the raise hand feature on their iPad or their computer on the right-hand side. I am looking right now and I'm not seeing any raised hands.
Thank you very much. Then I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission. So let's see. I still don't have my 5-sided die, but I'm going to pretend I do. A little bit too late for Vice Chair Pont, but there you have it. Commissioner Anderson, please let us let us know your thoughts, please.
I like sidewalks. I like sidewalks a lot. I have kids. I would be okay with anything that has a sidewalk.
Excellent. The door is open. The opportunity is now, and it doesn't close immediately. But I'm looking for comments on the restaurant project generally, please. A restaurant. I meant lodging. Nothing more to add? Thank you. Commissioner Hale.
I guess I'd like to start by just a large thanks to both the applicant and also city staff for what amounts to a monumental amount of quality work putting this proposal together. And then, the follow through and follow up on a large and evolving barrage of questions and clarifications that this sort of thing requires. I think they did a terrific job. They were professional, cheerful, and I very much appreciate it. And I think the citizens of St. Helena could and should take some pride in their work. And I just kind of wanted to start with a shout out to them. And I'm sure I'm leaving out armies of folk that chipped in too. I mean, the attorneys and the staff of the staff. But I mean, in general, I believe that the concept of this project carefully considers the nature and the scale and the flavor of the existing farmstead project and weaves elegantly an enhancing add-on that I find kind of both in sync with the existing project and I feel begins to cement the foundation for productive ways in which St. Helena can move forward with what I'd like to see as healthy partnerships that understand both the city's obligation to its infrastructure environment and the workforce needs. I was happy to witness the commitment to beginning to chip away at a workforce solution, and that it does so with some specifics, and doesn't entirely kick the can down the road with a deferred solution, just sort of money in a bucket sort of thing. I think it's important to point out that the city fully embraces the obligation that it has to follow through with both sort of the Phelps Village project, and understand that that's really just the tip of solving that issue. And I think fortunately, city has in its inventory sites and capacity that can solve some of those things. Because in talking to Mary Stevenson, which is our town, and a handful of other folks, it's pretty clear that the critical problem with this is land. And the city has in its inventory at least 2 sites that could perform as workforce housing sites: the Corbett Yard, Railroad Avenue, maybe more. And we're pretty fortunate about that. And to have these kind of sincere problem solvers working to service those workforce housing needs. And I think it's pretty important that if the city wants to fully thrive, I think it and its citizens need to demonstrate that it's willing to fulfill that obligation and both partner and provide what it can to solve those needs. I think the same kind of approach goes to the Purple Pipe solution. It's a partial solution that depends on the city's following through with the water treatment and the additional delivery system. I mean, I think that has great promise, and I'm glad to see the pieces in the development agreement that do put some dates to those and hold. And I think we all as citizens are going to have to hold our leaders accountable to that follow through. I think there's several kind of creative approaches in this proposal that go that choose to go beyond what's required. I think that's done by the applicant and the city in the sincere belief that by following through on a well-conceived idea, the finished project or product is going to be more successful. I think the negotiators of the development agreement did terrific work. They carefully considered the nature of this project. And again, kind of incidentally began to form a reasonable framework that can inform projects to follow it, which I think is part of our charter as a commission too, is to kind of inform things that come behind it and set the stage for this is how a working city works. So I think things that follow have a more clear expectation of what the city will require and what the city will partner in to build a more healthy and sustainable sort of ecosystem. And that's for St. Helena families, St. Helena businesses, and St. Helena visitors. I think the example of this project and its existence will serve St. Helena itself and in the future. So I'm fully supportive. And I just kind of wanted to say thanks to the folks that pulled this together. It's no small endeavor.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Hale. I am informed that the applicant would like to address the commission again. I'm also advised that you will have an opportunity, Commissioner Manette. But I'm also advised that I need not open the public hearing to do that. So I will simply invite Mr. Hall to speak, please.
Thank you, Chair Hardy. We had a clarification to the suggested amendments to the conditions of approval that Aaron set out this morning. It's a clarification to the first item in his memo under 1000 Mills Lane, which addresses the question of the chef's table and the demonstration classes being off-peak and their limitations. This condition is really speaking to the making sure that we have adequate parking. So this is really a parking-related condition, which means that it involves people that are not guests of the lodge. All the guests of the lodge have already been analyzed both in the traffic study and in provision for parking. And we thought that this could be clearer as to everyone's intent and would actually be more enforceable as well. And so I have some proposed language. With your permission, I'll read it. Maya already has this in written form from a communication from me a couple of hours ago. But shall I read it, Chair Hardy? Is that the appropriate thing?
Yes, please read it.
So as it exists, the condition said the chef's table and demonstration classes shall occur during off-peak hours. The chef's table is limited to 20 persons per event, and the demonstration classes are limited to 40 persons per event. We're proposing an alternative, which we think is clearer and more enforceable. It says, for attendees who are not lodging guests, 1, the chef's table and demonstration classes shall occur during off-peak hours. 2, the chef's table is limited to 20 persons per event. And 3, the demonstration classes are limited to 40 persons per event.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hall. I will take this back to the commission then for discussion.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. What I'm going to do now is invite Commissioner Manette to speak, and then anyone who's already spoken or passed will have an opportunity to speak to the proposed change in conditions as well. But Commissioner Manette, please.
Okay, I'm just speaking for the whole project.
Yes.
First, I want to echo Commissioner Hale's comments and acknowledge the enormous amount of work and effort that's gone into this development, and to congratulate Mr. Hall on the success of Farmstead as it exists. I regret that an EIR wasn't asked for initially, given the size and scope of this project. And I appreciate the goodwill that this developer has in the community and his efforts to earn that. And I think the cumulative effects are the most important information we need for this development and all large developments going forward. And I still have concerns about water, groundwater, as well as city water, traffic, especially in the evacuation context, noise and carbon emissions without reports and analyses of the cumulative effects on the environment of these issues. With just an MND, I don't feel that I have enough information about those effects to know if the results of the mitigated negative deck, that there are no significant environmental impacts from this project, are accurate. I think there should be an EIR before going forward. I am in a minority, at least on the commission, in my opinion, but I feel it is important to the integrity of the commission that we are all true to our convictions, even if they aren't popular. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you, Commissioner Manette. So I'll introduce my overall thoughts here. Then we'll see if there are other things we need to cover before moving towards the actions themselves. Just thinking about...
Sure. Are we 2, 3? Are we skipping part of what we're going to do?
Well, I'm on the lodging project.
Because several commissioners have spoken overall, and you talked about speaking overall, so I'm just curious.
Well, overall, I'm given the nature of the restaurant project, which changes so very little in reference to the existing condition. For me, the whole subject of project impacts really flows from my thoughts about the lodging project. And so when I say overall, that's really what I mean. I didn't, I could defer this to a later phase, but just given what I've heard so far, I think this is a good time. And we'll keep circling around, Vice Chair Pont, and until we're all comfortable that we've said what we need to say and that everything that needs to be discussed is discussed. So to the extent that I've allowed some disorder to creep into my promise of an ordered discussion, I'll just ask your forbearance. It seems to me that if 2020 stands for anything, it's that the kind of long planning horizon that characterizes the way in which general plans and such have been approached for decades. And you know, St. Helena had a master plan in the mid-1950s before general plans were required. You know, those documents are organized with 10, 20-year horizons or more. But again, as I take the experiences we've had in 2020 to heart, and that's just 2020 so far, it seems to me that, you know, that presumption that everything just proceeds incrementally, each year not too different from the one before, has been more or less thrown out the window. And I think that does require, here in St. Helena, that we think about projects of this significance in a new way. And more specifically, I think we really have to ask ourselves, you know, with a project of this scale, is it moving us forward towards a sustainable future? I mean, that's a, I know I'm making a face. That's just a terribly broad and maybe even romanticized kind of term, but I don't know how else to put it. For me, concerns about water supply are important. They're real. We can't, in my view, prudently expect future decades to be anything like decades past, with a possible exception of the last 4 or 5 years. And so I say all of this because I don't take the concerns that have been raised in connection with this project lightly. What makes a big difference for me is actually looking at the particulars in the light of these concerns. And we have an unusual opportunity with respect to water supply in connection with the installation of the purple pipe and the delivery of treated recycled wastewater in a volume that exceeds the water use of the project. That's an unusual opportunity, and even more important to me is that it incorporates an essential building block for launching recycling. And I think recycling is the most important way for us to increase our water supply. So we may not have so much water coming from nature in the future, but if we can recycle what we do have, we may have as much or more to use, depending on how all of that plays out. I think that's terribly important. I think just taken all together, all of the green elements of the project are really important. I'm truly convinced that looking forward, we have to think about ways to reduce our footprint in some cases physically, reduce our footprint in terms of using less water per capita or per acre, reduce our footprint in terms of reduced energy use, and certainly we need to move as far as we can, as fast as we can in terms of reliance on fossil fuels. But it seems to me this is a project that actually raises the bar, as has already been suggested in this discussion, in ways that do point towards the future and begin to inform us as commissioners and a community as to what kinds of project features are feasible and thus might even be required. Hotels offer unusual bargaining opportunities, frankly, because the hotel developer typically requires a development agreement, and that presents the city with a real bargaining opportunity. And we as a commission played no part in the bargaining itself, but it seems to me that the city has presented us with a proposed development agreement that reflects what can be accomplished with a sophisticated and willing applicant. And again, these are things that go a long ways towards suggesting, to me at least, the kinds of things we should be looking for opportunistically when they come up. And I believe being opportunistic is going to be essential for doing the kinds of things we need to do, like extending the distribution system for recycled wastewater. It's going to have to go piece by piece, but when we have opportunities to partner with the developer of a project that's going to move us forward in terms of the direction we need to take towards a sustainable economy and a sustainable way of life here, then those are good opportunities to seize. No doubt the city will also have to be very opportunistic in pursuing funding for some of these pieces, but this is that kind of opportunity to partner with a developer in a way that I think benefits the entire community. The tension or outright conflict in St. Helena regarding tourism is certainly not new. Although I think you can find a time, at least if we go back 50 years, when that's not a real dominant theme. From the 80s forward, it's been pretty much a constant theme, and this is an opportunity for us to incorporate a tourist serving project into the community that reflects the kinds of values that I think we need to have permeate the commercial side of life here moving forward. So, and my only other comment there really is that the Napa Valley's been a visitor destination for pretty much as long as it's existed as a part of the United States, or at least as a state. If I'm not mistaken, the date of the Sulphur Springs Resort at the edge of town is 1853. Hot springs resorts were once all throughout Napa County. Of course, Napa County at the beginning included Lake County, which has a whole bunch more than we usually think about. So Napa Valley's always been a visitor destination. The question is, how can we sort of coexist with tourism in a way that doesn't undermine our quality of life? And again, I think this is a project that has a lot of features that sort of point the way, and that's really that's why I support it. I think it moves us in the right direction. So those are my thoughts. And again, I want to be sure that all of us have addressed everything of concern in my outline here. If we are all finished with the lodging project and the, I should say, are there any commissioner comments or concerns about the development agreement? Let me call that out in particular. I haven't heard any, but I want to be sure we haven't overlooked that. I'm not seeing anyone with a Vice Chair Punt. Yes.
Like both you and Dan have commented, I really think the development agreement is the hidden gem of this project. When the things are done under that development agreement that it guarantees, either you won't see them, or there'll be a project that looks like it was done by somebody else. But this development agreement does supply the wherewithal to increase our low-cost housing, which both you and Dan mentioned is something we desperately need, and allows us to go a long way towards getting our recycled water project up and running. Two things that, as a public, you probably won't notice, but are desperately important to us. So I think this is the icing on the cake, and I love the development agreement.
Very good, thank you. Anyone else with a comment or concern about the development agreement? I think we've covered what fits in the realm of the use permit design review. The variance has been commented on. We have, in addition, lot line adjustment, lot merger. We've heard from Vice Chair Pont on that, so I'm just going to ask if there are any commissioners with questions or concerns about those parts of the whole package here. No, I'm seeing none. There's also a water agreement, and this does tie back into the purple pipe in certain respects, I believe. So I'm throwing that out just to make sure that that is not a subject of questions or concern or comments, and that if it is, that we have an opportunity to address them. I'm seeing none there. I've saved more or less for the end because it is kind of an overall topic in terms of the actions and the subject matter. So, and that's the environmental determination. That has been a subject of some discussion tonight with respect to cumulative impacts and the differences between and the decision whether or not to require an EIR rather than a mitigated negative declaration. We have received comments from the public related to the environmental determination. So I want to be sure that if there are any commissioners who have questions, concerns, or something they'd like to add about that, that we call those out now. I'm seeing none here. I just want to add on that particular subject that, and I can't help myself in this regard. I've been a land use attorney for 25 years now, so I have paid close attention to the correspondence we've received and close attention to the responses from staff, including the city attorney, and there have been some relevant materials provided by the applicant's consultants as well. I think the mitigated negative deck as presented is adequate. I think there's been a lot of what I would call smoke and mirrors, really, in some of the comments, particularly about groundwater and well use, and all of which I think have, as a practical matter, overlooked the fact that as the conditions of approval are written, this project must be water neutral. I think that's a very important thing to keep in mind when considering the some of the correspondence that we've received. So that's all I have to say about that. If there's nothing else, then I would suggest we take a short break and come back to see if we can wrap this up. It's 7:54 on my clock here. I would suggest we return at 8 or thereabouts. Thank you. Hello, hello, hello. Looks like we're all here, so I will call the meeting back to order. I do have one bit of housekeeping in terms of my own comments. And Mr. Heacock, I think you mentioned early in the meeting the possibility of using screen share to show us the changes that you had prepared. I'm thinking in particular about the new language that comes into play if the properties go into separate ownership.
Yeah, Xenia, can you please pull up the draft memo that we spoke about earlier?
Yes, give me 1 second.
Thank you.
There we are. So I believe it's the first bullet point you're referring to. Hope you're muted, Chair Hardy.
Thank you, Mr. Heacock. So my thought here was that well, as written, it refers to a sale or conveyance which results in operating practices that are different than what is approved in this use permit. So if that happens, the owner's successor and interest shall apply for use permit amendment. I could be talked out of this, but it seems to me that it really works best if the sale or conveyance triggers a review by staff to determine whether or not there are any changes in operations that in the director's opinion require an application for a mod. I don't want to assume that changes in ownership necessarily have that result, because I don't think that's true. I think two new owners could enter into an agreement that obligates them both to operate according to the conditions of the existing permit. That's at least possible. I was originally concerned that we have something to cover the consequences, that addresses the potential for consequences of sale that make that impossible, which is another possibility. But I don't think we need to assume that a sale means a use permit amendment is required. It might be for one, it might be for the other, it might be for neither. So that was my thought there. Thank you for bringing that up on the screen. Maybe we should leave it up on the screen while we see if the rest of the commission agrees with me or not. Let's see if I can figure out how to see everyone here. That's a little bit better. Well, not entirely. I don't know. Commissioner Hale, do you have any comments on this subject?
I see your point. I'm not sure what the language, you'd probably be more adept at crafting that language, but I think it's certainly reasonable that you would have it, I don't know, the language that it's goes under review. Should ownership change, it goes under review. at the determination of the the current planning director. I think that makes sense.
Commissioner Anderson, do you have any thoughts on this?
I think what you've said makes sense.
Thank you. Vice Chair Pont?
My only concern would be it leaves the choice of whether or not this comes back fully up to staff. And the way it's written, it has them apply for a use permit, not necessarily that one is necessary or granted.
Well, and that really goes to the heart of what troubled me is I hate to see a condition written in that requires an application that might be entirely unnecessary. I mean, that just seems undesirable and untidy to me.
I agree that's possible, but I would also consider it an unlikely outcome.
Well, I have sometimes described myself as an incurable optimist, so that could be reflected here. Commissioner Manette, did you have something to add?
Well, I'm an incurable pessimist. I'm an incurable realist, I think. Yes, I think that
that's what pessimists always say, by the way.
Well, it's my confirmation bias, I admit, but certainly there's plenty of evidence to back it up, but whatever, depends on where you look. My sense is that there should be as much oversight as possible. If you're going to err in any direction, err in the direction of confirming that the city and the people who are in the city at the time, we can't read the future. We don't know what's going to be what. We don't, that it's always good to take a look, see, and to give people who are in the positions of oversight and power at the time the opportunity to weigh in and give the public, more importantly, to give the public the opportunity to weigh in. And I don't think it should be ministerial ever. I think anything this big, any project this big should always involve everyone in the town because it impacts everyone in the town, I think. So I think it's very good to have, to require that anytime this is sold, that we look at what the new owners have in mind and do a review. So, yeah, I think it's good. Again,
Hardy?
Yes?
Is there any possibility for a middle-of-the-road option that they don't necessarily apply for use permit, but the current use permits come up for review of some sort at the commission, in which case they get to say, you're fine, or no, you're not?
Well, yeah, that would be the logical compromise that upon sale there's a review to determine whether or not the sale has resulted in operating practices different from what's approved in the use permit. And then if the determination were made that there were such changes in operating practices, then the applications for use permit amendment would be required, and that would be a subsequent process as just follow the language that's there right now. That's a simple change to make.
I mean, that way there is a review. There is a review by the commission that I think meets Bobby's desire. But if the review at the commission says, no, there's not a use permit change needed, they don't need to apply for a use permit, which would meet what you're, I think, looking for.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me.
And I think that it should be on public record, whoever would buy it, that they would agree with the uses in the permit, so that it would be known that they knew and that they made an agreement to abide by the use permit. I think that's important.
I'm not in favor of writing any special conditions in that regard. Use permit compliance. Well, the use permit runs with the land, and the compliance obligations follow the permit.
It's nice to get an acknowledgement from the person involved that they understand it and that they agree with it. I mean, especially.
I understand what you're asking for.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, wouldn't that be automatic if they had a hearing? I mean, that would be automatic.
So I think having made this proposal and seen it evolve, it would be wise for me to ask Mr. Walsh if he has any sage words for us.
Well, thank you, Chair Hardy. So I would say that I think the proposal that there be some elevation to the commission for discussion. That's, as you were discussing it, that's kind of what I was thinking was the best way for you to go. So I think the discussion, kind of what I think the end result is that, there would be some notification upon change of ownership. The planning commission would discuss it and determine whether or not an amendment to the use permit was necessary is kind of the right approach. In terms of notification, like you said, the conditional use permit does run with the land. It would be a requirement of anyone who purchased the property that they comply with the use permit, and a purchaser of the property who's doing their due diligence would have to be aware of that. So I think what the normal course of business would be sufficient for us to be able to ensure compliance. And if someone ignored that requirement, they would be in violation of their use permit and could, run the risk of a revocation. So they wouldn't want to go down that road. So I think in terms of actually drafting the language, I think the discussion that you have had would give sufficient direction for us to come up with language to elevate to the council. Should this be your direction? I'd probably rather do that staff take your direction and draft some language to make those revisions rather than trying to, draft the language on the dais. That's my suggestion.
Makes sense to me. And then I have a related question for either Mr. Rosa or Mr. Heacock. In the past, I know it has been the practice of the city to record use permits, actually to address the concern Commissioner Manette articulated. It's a very easy way to essentially guarantee that any new owner is aware of the permit. Is that still the practice or not? Because I've honestly lost track.
No, Chair Hardy, that's not the practice. It hasn't been for quite some time.
Very good. I also recall that at some point the county recorder refused to record them. I don't know if that has something to do with the cessation of the practice or not. So I think we've got a concept there that's well enough articulated, as we've heard, that staff can complete the drafting. I believe we are perilously close to making motions, but I want to be sure that, yes. Vice Chair Pond.
Chair Hardy, can we, going through this a little more, can we discuss the condition change the applicant has requested to the condition change for the seating at the chef's table and the demonstration classes?
Absolutely. I don't want to leave anything undiscussed. I'm just depending a bit on my fellow commissioners to let me know. Thank you.
Now, when we go to the vote, we've got a solid idea of what we're doing. I personally have no trouble with this. I would, if I had my druthers, I'd have a bright line rather than what the applicant is suggesting. But the applicant is suggesting, I think, is going to be operationally difficult for them. If I'm a resident and I call in and say, well, I want to go to the 6 o'clock chef seating, and who's ever taking the reservation says, no, you can't do that because you're a resident. I'm not sure they're going to want to do that, but if they're saying that's what they're going to do, I'm fine with it.
Thank you. I have no objections to the requested change in the condition. Are there any other commissioner comments on the applicant's request? I'm seeing none, so I think we have covered the two changes, my proposal and the applicant's request. So I'll just ask once more. Yes, Vice Chair Pont.
The class 1.
Yes. No, we did not resolve that. That is.
Yeah. And if I could, let me just read one of the sections from the Caltrans manual. In selecting the proper facility, an overriding concern is to assure that the proposed facility will not encourage or require cyclists or motorists to operate in a manner that is inconsistent with the rules of the road. An important consideration is selection of the type of facility is continuity. Alternating segments of Class 1 to Class 2 or Class 3 bikeways along a route is generally incompatible as street crossing by bicyclists is required when the route changes character. Also, wrong-way bicycle travel will occur on the street beyond the ends of the bike paths because of the inconvenience of having to cross the street. So there it is. Straight out of their manual, word for word. They're not recommending this facility.
Thank you. I'm just thinking here for a moment, Vice Chair Pont, with respect to the cyclist on the wrong side of the road concern called out in the Caltrans manual, where would that fit into the layout here? I find it easy to visualize someone leaving the lodging and going down this path. I'm not even sure. Well, I suppose that is the question. If they're coming from town and getting onto the path, how do they do that? Is that the concern or the situation that this part of the manual addresses?
For me, this design problem is at the intersection.
Yeah. Intersection with 29.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If, let's say you're riding westbound on the path, right? And for some reason you want to go southbound on 29. You got to remember, I'm going to make the bet that most of these folks on the bikes are not regular bike riders themselves. That they're not too clear about the rules of the road. I don't know about you, but when I was younger, I was taught to ride opposite of the direction of the traffic. we still see that a lot on the roadways now. I think they will get to the end of the path, they will make a left turn, and they will go southbound on 29 in the wrong direction. I think you'll have the same problem with somebody coming to the intersection from the north. They will just turn right straight across the street and head for the bike path, which frankly is not the way it should be done. You need to get in the turn lane, you need to stop, you need to wait for the light to change, then you're able to turn. I think you've got way too many naive riders here on too short of a bike path. If the city cares to proceed with this, that's fine. My advice just comes from a long stint as a traffic planner and literally what the Caltrans manual says.
I appreciate that. I'm not quite sure whether I'm as pessimistic about rider behavior as you are, although my own orientation from personal experience to bicycle paths is probably an outlier. When I bicycled everywhere, I avoided them whenever possible because I thought they were generally, well, because...
that's in the section I didn't read you, but that's okay.
I found the users of bicycle paths less predictable than the typical automobile driver. I should also confess that in the years when I commuted by bicycle in San Francisco, I had 3 traffic accidents and destroyed 2.5 bicycles in the process. So I'm really just a terrible guide to making good decisions clearly about bicycling. Yes, Commissioner Manette.
Yes, I would like to ask Commissioner Pont this question. I see what you're talking about. It's rather alarming, and I'm wondering what is it that you'd like to see to address this issue, if anything?
Yeah, the planning is for a longer class 1 to come through, and this one to connect up to the longer class 1.
Okay.
If that happens, and as that happens, I would expect, frankly, most of the bicyclists to stick with the class 1. 29 is not comfortable for a naive cyclist. It just isn't. And then
change anything in this? Do you want to change anything in the development plan? I mean, in this document? Or?
Well, simply that this would come after the longer class 1 comes through.
Okay.
And you know, I think the cyclists, at least the ones that are interested in cycling into town, would stick with the longer class 1. I know they're going to widen the bridge over the creek, which is good, but riding a bicycle over the bridge over the creek now is not a comfortable experience, even for one who is used to riding bicycles. So frankly, if they're going to think they're going to be comfortable riding over that, I don't think that's likely. So 29 isn't comfortable for cyclists as it is. I think they would stick with the class 1 that's behind the project.
So do you want to change something?
All I want to do is say, this doesn't go in as a class 1 until the class 1 comes through. How that happens, I think, would be up to the applicant and Public Works. If they want to put in a 10-foot sidewalk, fine, but it doesn't get labeled as a class 1. And not being labeled as a class 1, you're not supposed to ride a bicycle on it. End of story.
And your main goal here is, I mean, your main point is public safety.
Public safety and, frankly, protection of the city and the applicant. Because we're doing this knowing
I agree.
knowing that Caltrans advises against it. And that fall, even if I didn't read this, it fell into a should have known.
I hear you.
So
reasonable to me.
There we are.
Well, given the discussion we've already had, what we've heard both from our public works director and the applicant's consultants, I would think that the pathway you've just described, where the sidewalk is constructed but it isn't identified and signed as a Class 1 bikeway, I think that's the appropriate way to go. And then I would suggest that the direction to staff is to amend the conditions so that it states that the a 10-foot sidewalk, if constructed prior to completion of the Class 1 on Highway 29, is not signed or otherwise identified as a Class 1 bike path until that connection at the highway is real. At least that's how I'm understanding it. If that makes sense to everyone else, then we'll just ask staff if they understood it. Commissioner, Vice Chair Pont, your mic is still off.
I was going to say, I have no problem with that. That protects both the city, the applicant, and the cyclists.
Yeah.
If this is a Class 1 path, don't use it as if it is one.
And then I'll just ask Mr. Walsh if the direction is adequate on this particular change.
I think it is, if I understood it correctly. And just to restate it, I would say that we would be amending the recommended conditions of approval to change the references to a Class 1 bike lane and change those to a 10-foot sidewalk that would not be designated as a Class 1 bike lane until the full span of the Class 1 bike lane was installed along that area. Is that basically correct?
That's the intent, yes.
Okay. So yeah, I think we can amend the condition accordingly, working with staff.
Very good. So we've covered 3 changes that have been introduced into our discussion this evening. Is there anything else any of the commissioners wish to discuss or address at this time?
I just want to briefly say something that you hit on a little bit, and that is that going forward, I think I would like to see us have a discussion about economic diversity in the town, in terms of hotels being the one and only suggestion for funding our town. I don't know if that's appropriate for the Planning Commission to do, but it seems like an important issue. Maybe that's a City Council thing more than a Planning Commission thing. I don't know, but I would like to hear to be part of that discussion and hear experts and hear what people in other towns have done, so that we are not victim to what, like the pandemic just kind of shut. If we're all tourists and we don't have any other kind of diversity for our economy, then it kind of doesn't give us as much protection in terms of the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune coming our way. So it's just an idea. I would love to hear what other people had to say, and I think it's an interesting idea about having economic diversity in an area where it's almost like it's like a factory town. There's tourism, that's it, and that's the only thing that's being proposed as a way of getting money for the town is through hotels. So just an idea.
Thank you. That does seem to me quite clearly to be a policy matter, not within our purview as planning commissioners. We are except when we're asked to propose new policies, which does happen from time to time. In effect, that's what happens when a draft general plan comes to us for review. But unless directed by the council, that's outside our scope.
Okay.
Although I agree with you, it's both an interesting subject and an important one.
Okay,
and I would just add that I think there's some confusion sometimes, or just a failure to recognize the difference between diversifying the economy and diversifying the city's revenue sources.
okay.
There are lots of things we could do to diversify the local economy that would make no difference to the city's revenue whatsoever.
Interesting.
So I'm back to the rest of the commission then to see if there's anything else on. This is kind of like the last call at an English pub. Anything else anyone has to say? I'm seeing none, which then does suggest to me that we're ready to move to the action items, which are, unless I'm very much mistaken, folded into two separate resolutions and conditions of approval. But who would like to take a lead role here? And Ms. DeRosa, do you want to sort of organize us in terms of the actions we need to take? That might be helpful.
Yeah, I actually just pulled out of my binder page 82. For those that looking at the packet online, I believe it's still page 82 of the packet. And it is, the heading has staff recommendation, and there's three items. The first item relates to the all the items for 738 Main Street, which is the restaurant. The second item relates to the resolution and all the items related to the hotel at 1000 Mills Lane. And then that also includes the lot. We have the lot merger, lot line adjustment. Excuse me, the second one relates to the mitigated negative declaration for the lot merger, lot line adjustment, use permit, design review, variance, water agreement. And then lastly, because there is a development agreement, one of the unique things is that the Planning Commission will make findings in adopting the resolution related to the ordinance for the development agreement. And all three of these items, the recommendation will go on to the City Council, who will be the final decision-making body. So I just recommend just starting with number one, and then to make also note of the memorandum dated September 16th from Senior Planner Heacock with the additional conditions of approval, and those as amended pursuant to the record tonight, and the addition of the amendments related to the Class 1 bikeway. So I just want to make sure that we wrap all those. And of course, the amendment from Mr. Hall related to the chef's table.
Okay, so having heard all of that, is there some brave commissioner ready to make a motion? Vice Chair Pond, please.
Yeah, I'm actually reading from the agenda. I would move that the commission recommend the City Council adopt the mitigated negative declaration and the mitigation and monitoring and reporting program for the project at 738 Main, meet the required project findings, and approve the use permit amendment and design review for those parts of the project at 738 Main. Further, that we adopt a resolution recommending the City Council approve, once again, the mitigated negative declaration and mitigating and monitoring reporting program for the project at 1000 Mills Lane, and make the required findings to approve a lot merger, lot line adjustment, use permit, design review, variance, and water agreement. And lastly, adopt a resolution making specific findings and recommending that the City Council adopt an ordinance to approve the development agreement between the applicant and the City of St. Helena for the Long Meadow Ranch LLC lodging project at 1000 Mills Lane. Further, that the resolutions be adjusted to the discussions we had tonight, including Senior Planner Peacock's memo of September 16th, the discussions and determination of the Class 1 bicycle path, and the recommendation from the applicant to change the first bullet under 1000 Mills Lane in Senior Planner Peacock's memo on the chef's table and the demonstration classes.
And did we cover in that the change to the condition in Senior Planner Hickok's memo regarding a change of ownership?
Thank you very much. I'll take that amendment.
Very good.
Second.
I'm looking at our planning director. This is where.
Just wave it as Maya if we got it right.
Okay. There are no alarms ringing. Is there a second to the motion, please?
I'm sorry, could we pause one moment? I just wanted to defer to our city attorney to make sure because it sounds like this is set up as one motion on all the items in the totality versus taking an action on each one individually. So I just wanted to make sure we're following due process.
I am okay with there being a motion on all three resolutions. If it doesn't pass, then obviously you could take them individually, but it's fine to make the motion with the modifications on one.
Okay.
There's one point I'd like to bring up pursuant to Mr. Walsh's comment there. Commissioner Manette, it is with a single motion, then you don't have a very good way other than just stating your objection to the record to object to approval of the mitigated negative deck other than by voting no on everything. So just wanted to be sure that you understood that and made the choice that you wish to make in that regard. If you would like the CEQA determination called out separately, I believe there would be a way to do that, although I might prudently defer to Mr. Walsh in terms of that.
I did think about that in terms of Commissioner Manette's earlier statements, but the way the resolutions are structured for both the projects, both individual projects, the recommendation includes a recommendation for approval of the mitigated neg deck on both of those. Yeah. So it would be hard to separate them out and still adhere to the resolutions.
Understood.
Possible, but challenging.
And so that's, and then Commissioner Manette, that's just the nature of what we have here. You can state your objections, but vote to approve, or you can vote to deny the whole resolution. Our only choice is whether we're taking all three resolutions in one motion or not. But in terms of your concerns, I don't think that makes a difference. Vice Chair Pont, did you have something to add? A microphone, please. There.
I would also suggest that if you vote against the mitigated negative declaration, that kills everything anyway.
Right. Well, but we've already
except for things like the lot line adjustment.
We've got the way the resolutions are structured. It's pretty much straight up, straight down per resolution. at most. So, Commissioner Monette, then my question for you is simply, do you have any preference as to whether we take this all in one action or not?
Well, first I want to thank you for your consideration and sensitivity for me. And no, I don't have I'm fine with the way it is.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be sure.
Yeah.
Then you're welcome. So with that clarified, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Then without further ado, as they say, Ms. Gamera, would you please call the roll?
Vice Chair Pont,
We couldn't hear you.
Vice Chair.
Yes? You getting that?
Yeah. Thank you.
Commissioner Hale,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Monette,
No.
and Chair Hardy.
Yes. So I believe that completes this evening's meeting and agenda. But before we adjourn, I do want to thank everyone involved in all of the work it required, both on the city staff side and on the applicant side, to get this important project to the commission and through the process. I have some idea of how much work is involved. I'm never really looking at more than a piece when I'm working on a project, but I see enough to have some real appreciation for the time, the effort, and the expense. So thank you. And I want to thank the applicant for working with the city and in the end going the extra mile, as it were, to make this project the unusually beneficial proposal that it is.
Thank you, Chair Hardy.
You're welcome. So that's it, unless there are some other final comments from members of the commission. And I'm seeing no one raising their hand. Thank you all, and good night. This meeting is adjourned.